Welcome to Fireside Chat on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network by Run Try Bike. We have Kurt Madden with us today, who is the founder and CEO of KM Coaching and Consulting, the director of coach development for TriDot, a USAT Level 1 certified coach, and Ironman U certified coach. If that wasn't enough, Kurt participated in the Ironman World Championships in 1980 when triathlon was just a toddler. And from 1980 to 1985, he competed as a professional triathlete. We're going to dive into all of that and more with Kurt. But before we bring him onto the show, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network on your favorite podcast platforms. There are 9 shows to choose from with various stories and hosts, and I'm sure you'll find one or all of them to your liking. So let's bring Kurt onto the show and let's talk about the sport of triathlon, TriDot coaching, what's happened in 1980 compared to what's happening today, and all things in between. Hey, Kurt, how are you?
Oh, I've got the logs in the fire. I think I'm ready to go. And hey, let's go ahead and get this party started.
That's fantastic. Thanks for joining me today. One of the things that we love to do on our show is sort of break the ice and the tension a little bit, get people to laugh somewhat. And the first question I ask every guest is pineapple on pizza, yay or nay?
Copy that. I would definitely throw a little mango too with the pineapple. So I'm in.
Oh, totally out of left field wild card play right here. I got to tell you, I drew the line at no pineapple, but do I now have to throw no mango onto my list of things to avoid? How is mango good on pizza? Tell me.
Well, that's the Ohana. See, that's what we're going to get right to. We're going to start right there when that tree was planted in the ground, and we're going to bring the Ohana into this session, this podcast today to make sure our viewers are feeling the love, feeling the positive vibe, a little trade wind blowing, and we're going to have a great time.
I love it. So let's actually do start there, because the first question I do have written down here is I want to go back to 1980 and the Ironman World Championships. What was that like 44 years ago in comparison to what you see at today's event?
I look back on that and it was definitely just surreal. And to give the listeners a little bit of context, I think that I was literally at the right place at the right time. And I am just beyond grateful that I lived in San Diego on the beach. I was all of 19, 20 years old. And every year they had this event called Tug's Tavern Swim, Run, Swim, which was a half a mile swim, 5.5 mile run down the beach, and a half a mile swim. And I figure, what the heck, I'll just pay my $15 and I'll get something, a couple tacos after. So I jumped in. I didn't even train, and I was 30th out of 400. Like, whoa, my butt, it was handed to me big time. But all of a sudden I'm thinking, if I actually trained, what a concept. If I trained and prepared, I'd do a little bit better. So I didn't train like I'm training as a pro and today, but I actually did a couple sessions on the beach. The next year I finished third, and a light went off in my head. I said, whoa, I'm not even one of these guys, but today I did it. And then the race director, Tom Warren, he pulled me over and he's like, hey, you ever look at Sports Illustrated? I said, well, sometimes, there's swimsuit issues. I might look at a Sports Illustrated, but he goes, I said, Tom, you're actually on the cover. And he goes, yeah. And he opened it up and I'm like, oh my gosh, my eyes got real big. Like, you did this thing in Hawaii. So he talked me through it. He showed me something called the newspaper. And he said, listen, you can swim, you can run, just go and get a bike. And that's all he said. I literally ran home. I told my wife, we had just gotten married, like, Tom said we should go to Hawaii. She goes, oh, that's a great idea. And before I knew it, I threw down $20. And I'm like, okay, I bought this bike. It was a Windsor. It must have been at least 50 pounds.
I
And
believe it.
yeah, and I just rode and I bike, and I was a graduate teaching assistant at San Diego State, a swimming coach. I had time to train, and just did that. Before I knew it, I am flying to Oahu. The only problem we got there is that they had one of the biggest storms of all time, and the surf at Waikiki was 20 feet. Even back then, people did have common sense, believe it or not, because that was after the 70s. And Tom Warren was there, Dave Scott was there, Jim Lampley was there, Diane and I had. I'm like, whoa, this is really, really cool. And they said, hey, we're going to move the swim over to Ala Moana Harbor. So they said, hey, we'll just set up 2 lane lines. It's 1,000 yards, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're out. Pre-race was pretty simple, pretty straightforward, not like it is today. It was real simple. Hey, guys, there's only one thing you need to remember. Follow the rules and no cheating. Do you have any questions? Actually, I hope at some point I can share that with you and you can see we still have that. It was literally almost on a napkin. So everything was chill except one guy raised his hand. He goes, "Well, what if you can't swim?" Oh dear, that's going to be problematic. So, and there was no time limit. So we line up on race morning. We all got in a circle, and this was like just really, I'll never forget this moment. It was just something that I cherish. It was that Ohana vibe that you can imagine 100 people are in a circle. They do the shell. Everyone prays. Hey, let's be safe out there today. Have a good time. But now it's game on. And I knew in the swim that was going to be too much of a problem because I was a strong swimmer in high school and I had, I felt good about that. So it was boom, 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 boom. I'm out of the water 6. Dave Scott's already down, taken off. But the crew actually followed you. So it was an open course and nothing was closed because we know Oahu is a very, very busy place, especially Honolulu. So, hey, hop on the bike. And before you know it, just moving right along and get all the way to the other side to the North Island. Got a long climb, come back down. 2 miles from the finish, I flatted.
Oh
And I'm
no.
like, oh yeah, I'm in traffic and I flatted. So you can imagine when you're doing rides with groups, like that's not a good thing. So anyway, I flatted right there and I said, with 2 miles to go, I'll just ride it in on the flat. So I rode it in on the flat and I came in and changed on the run. They gave us a course map
For the
in your hand
run.
for the run. They gave us a course map for the run, and they said follow this. So I've got my actually dolphin shorts on. This is epic, it's like a Richard Simmons thing. So I'm looking at this map like I am clueless. I'm looking at the signs. Those are very long names. And I run around and they're one-way streets and my crew can't find me. So I run about 4 blocks and I see this Hawaiian on the corner and he's smoking a big reefer. I mean, huge smoke is just blowing off. And I just look up, I said, brah, which way do I go? He goes, brah, you go that way. And that's all he said. And I said, thank you so much. Hang loose. And I just took off and I kept running. And all of a sudden I'm on the course. Cool. And I kept running and running. So we're running now the Honolulu Marathon. Kind of that moral dilemma, is that I got to a point where they actually had weigh stations where they had to weigh you, 4 times, and they just wanted to make sure you didn't lose 10% of your body weight. And the story
Right.
goes, Dave Scott knew he was light, so he took a bike bottle and stuck it in the very back, and he pulls up to the weigh station there, and they're going, "Oh, gee, this fella actually gained some weight." Boom, and Dave takes off. But they were trying to now remember this was the beginning, so we got to set a really low bar on this. But
Yeah.
anyway, to fast track, I'm at mile 15 and I look and I go, I could tell that is Tom Warren. I go, oh my gosh, this is now that moral dilemma. This is the guy that won the race. This is the guy that told me to get my butt over here. And now I'm here. And he's 100 yards ahead of me. And my wife screaming out the car, get your butt in gear. Come on, Tommy's right there. Just take his head off. And I'm like, whoa, she's getting super competitive. And do I listen to her or do I respect? So it was just one of those things. And I just prayed, like, hey, Tommy, I'm feeling pretty good. And I think it's time for me to go around you. So Dave had finished, and I was like 6th overall or 7th overall. And as soon as I crossed that finish line, she turned and she said, I can do that. And I'm like, whoa, that was so surreal of like she watched this thing for it was like 11 hours and 7 minutes. She can do that. And really, Jason, as I fast forward it, that still happens today. Is that people go to one of these events and they're like, I can do that.
Yeah.
Awesome. So it was amazing. Now the story doesn't end there because I'm finished. I'm done at 6:30 at night. The young man or the older gentleman that couldn't swim actually dog paddled. He got out of the water. He did the bike at 2 o'clock in the morning. There's no time at 2 o'clock in the morning. He's starting to wobble all over. He pops into a Denny's and he sits there for 2 hours pounding down coffee and pancakes. He gets back on the course. He finishes at 7 o'clock, literally just before the award ceremony. That was the last time they actually said, oh, no, no, we have to put a time restriction on that. So I think in that race, there were 99 people, and I want to say probably 94, 95 actually finished it. So that was the class of 1980 with people that you know now.
Yeah.
So you've got Dave Scott there, you've got Bob Babbitt. I met Bob on the bus as we were going around. John Howard. John was just a legend in the early 80s. Chuck Newman, an underwater demolition SEAL. I mean, all these people. Dave McGilvery, who actually turned into, now he really kind of oversees the Boston Marathon. So that class of 1980 was just really, really huge. And here we are today.
That is fantastic, and I'm not asking you to demean anybody or anything, but what's it like when you guys go back to the Ironman World Championships today, and you're having coffee, and you're looking around, and the bikes that are out there today, and the carbon plated shoes that are out there today, and the watches that people have when you're holding a map to try to figure out where to run? Like, do you guys think about like what could have been if we would have had X? How fast or how much better would the experience have been?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's you take what you can at the time because that's the best resource you have. And I
Right,
think when you don't know, you don't know.
right,
It's easy to look back and say, okay, let's do the what if. What if I would have had all those things? But I think in a way it was kind of good because we were, I think actually as pioneers in the sport, we were trying to pave the way, and we were trying to do this in such a way that it was the foundation of the sport. We didn't realize it at the time because honestly, and Bob Abbott has mentioned this more than once to me, I actually thought at that moment, like, this is like a Woodstock. This is I
yeah,
wouldn't say freak show, but it was just a happening before the internets. But
right.
there was ABC there, and Lampley did a good job. Diane and Aya did a good job, but I never thought really it would go anywhere at all. Little did I realize, literally, it started just gaining momentum. I mean, they had to move the event the next year over to the Big Island because the popular requests of people coming in. Plus, the entry fee was very reasonable back then too. But it's all relative.
Does it just blow your mind some days when you go out to the pier and you see all the bikes inside the transition area and all the athletes as they get ready to enter the water? Does it just blow your mind to think back to your 1980 and you said 99 people were participating, and gosh, that's probably the 18 to 24 age group these days is probably 100 people, you know?
Yeah, it does blow my mind because looking back on that, I think I'm about 99% correct. That was the only race. In other words, we didn't have a series yet that you would build up to. So you literally trained all year just for that race. I remember that vividly. I was just doing so much volume and things like that. And I think now it's almost like we've got these Ferraris. Like it's very humbling versus what we had in the very beginning. But I think with change, that is the one constant in our sport. And that's what I think is really, really exciting. So, it is what it is. But I think, again, it's something that even back then, it was so simple. I can remember going into a bike shop in Honolulu. I didn't have bike shoes, I had Nike waffle trainers. And the guy at the bike shop, this is what he said, "I can make you go faster." And I said, "Great. What are you thinking?" He said, "We'll put toe clips on the bike." And I said, "Hey, that is really cool. Let's do toe clips." And really, my bike split wasn't all that bad for the bike that I was riding back then. So, I mean, those were just simple things, but, we did have helmets, and that was a good thing. But, you know, I remember John Howard was definitely, he was like almost a pro cyclist. And I think his bike split then on a road bike, and again, that was kind of with traffic. I think his bike split was in the range of like 416 or 420.
Wow.
He went by like a bullet, just
Yeah.
like, whoa, that was incredible. But he wasn't that good of a swimmer, so you have to kind of balance all three disciplines.
I love these stories because I think it gives athletes like myself and the people who are just getting into these sports perspective. We were talking about RPE and racing without technology in the green room, and oftentimes we hinder our progress because we're like, "Oh, my watch is beeping at me to slow down, even though I feel great," or any number of different things. And so hearing these stories gives me perspective as an athlete, um, and being able to get better. You're a TriDot coach. You work with coaches within the TriDot family. How often do you find yourself having conversations about perspective, and not the old man shaking his fist at the clouds like back in my day, but giving them perspective about training and how to connect the body to the technology?
Yeah, and I think really it comes down to one word, is intuition. Is it People want to look at the app, they want to drink the smoothie, they want to do the cappuccino to say I've got it. But this is an athlete that you have to be kind of a almost like a novice or an intern to a practitioner, to a master to get to those 10,000 hours, and then you're on autopilot. I think some people naturally have that gift. I think that's maybe the one downside to technology is we are so dependent upon everything's got to line up with my power meter. I've got to have my shoes. I've got to have my wheel on, my tri bars, my whole setup. I mean, everything is just so dialed in. But as I work with people, I try to go through the what ifs. Like, I'm going to put 4 parachutes on your back. That's my job as your guide, as your Sherpa. Even though I'm not going to be with you on the race, I'm going to be in your head. And I want you to develop that intuition. So when you're swimming, you should know pace. If you're swimming hundreds at 130, you don't even need a clock. You don't need form goggles. It's just like, I can tell by my RP, I'm at a 130. Boom. On the bike, when you're at 150 watts, I don't care if you're going uphill, on a flat, in headwind, downhill's a little bit tougher, but you know where you are. Because I've told people the more you do this, you are going to have days where something goes wrong and you don't want to lose your headset, meaning your mind, and just blow a head gasket out there because you want to enjoy the event. So it's one of those things. And then on the run, it's the same thing. But now, then you throw in the environmental factors, and every race has a different vibe to it. I think what is so humbling about Kona is that that is the one event that you have to really there's hundreds of Ironman distance races that have been held around the world, but Kona is that very unique one where I've seen it crush every single level of athlete in half. And I think in a way it's like life. It's like you're going to get knocked down 7 times, but you have to get up 8, and you can't get on your cell phone and call someone. No, you've got to kind of, as we say, man up, and you've got to be in the arena, and you've got to deal with it right there. And I think once you accept that and you understand that, it gets a lot easier. So developing intuition in life, and I love the masters because they do it very well, but it just takes time. And that's the beauty of wisdom and getting your reps in and enjoying the journey to say, I should probably fail a couple times because you know what, I'll never make that mistake again.
I think the word that always comes to mind when it comes to these sports, and I do have 18 years here, so I have perspective, is patience, right? Like if somebody would have talked to me 18 years ago about being patient and progressing through the sports, I probably would have shoo-shooed them away. But when you start having progress and you realize that it takes time to get better, fitter, stronger, faster, and all of the above, you start to realize, okay, I can put in the training time and the volume to get to X, and accomplish my goals. One of the things I keep thinking about as we're having this conversation is you became a pro triathlete in 1980, and we're a pro till 1985. What's it like to try to have patience when you're competing at that level at the same time? Is that a really difficult balance, or was it something that came natural to you?
The competition came natural to me. However, when you're racing for money, your mindset changes because now you've got a little bit more skin in the game, especially when you're trying to make ends meet. Now, again, we weren't making the money that the triathletes make today, but it was kind of our bread and butter. So if you've got a full sponsorship, and I was fortunate that I had a sponsorship from Nike. I had one from Specialized. I had one for Arena, so I was covered, and it would add up, and then I would get trips and things like that. But when you're actually racing for money, it's a different vibe because the person in front of you is your next mortgage payment.
Hmm.
And that could be your friend, and money can cause, it's maybe difficult for our listeners to understand, but money can cause problems versus the sport was started to, we're going to swim, bike, run, be an Ironman, and brag the rest of our life. You throw money on top of that. I think when John Collins, when it actually started, that money wasn't kind of part of it. However, as you get into it and then you start to sacrifice and make the commitment of now you're training 15 to 20 hours per week and you're traveling, compensation does come into the equation if you're, have a companion or not, but you have to make ends meet financially. So I think in a way it's that two-edged sword, and understanding, because it can get really heightened things in your emotions. So there's a lot more pressure, especially when you have endorsements and you have sponsors and they're telling you, and you will do X, Y, and Z in these races. Now, I mean, to be politically correct, I'm very grateful. And I had to do that. But I can remember flying all the way to Brazil. This quick sidebar, you can imagine going all the way to Brazil for their very first triathlon in like 1983. It was an Olympic distance on Copacabana Beach. It was right where they had the Olympics triathlon there in Rio. So
Mhm.
I'm down there. I'm the only American. I mean, people are speaking Portuguese 100 miles an hour. I'm like, oh my goodness. I was like, wait, I'm like this white guy. And I said to myself, I just have one strategy. I think the best thing I can do today is just go right off the front because they're going to be so confused. I figured if I can just do that, it'd be okay. And there was a guy over on the side kind of looking at me, this Brazilian, and I was looking at him, and we made eye contact a couple times. So yeah, it worked out well. It got so chaotic. I just came out of the water like second or third, hopped on the bike, and I'm following this guy on a motorcycle, and I'm figuring I'm just going with him. Well, I'm not sure where he knew where he was going or not. So anyway, I came off the bike first. I did the whole run, and I won it. Then they disqualified me. And yeah, that was quite a concept. Now I was a guest in a foreign country, and the one Brazilian, his name was Carlos Dolabella. He came over and he says, "Hey, bro, don't worry about it. It's all good." He said, you did very, very well today. And you did, he went the wrong way, so don't worry about that. So anyway, he invited me over to his house, and here I am in Rio, Copacabana. Today, we are still friends. So I can go back to that event where it was just complete. Now, if you want a lot of excitement, first of all, go to Rio de Janeiro. Secondly, throw a triathlon on top of that, and all heck will break loose. So that was a pretty epic experience to just, go down there and experience that. Little did I realize that here we go. Here we go. And the Olympics were held there. And there was another person there that went into the Ultraman, and he won the Ultraman like 6 or 7 times, which goes around the entire Alejandro. And when I was in Kona in 2013 with Alejandro, he told the story when he was 17 years old. He goes, I was on the beach in Copacabana and I looked over, I saw this American. And I'm
No
thinking,
way.
no, no, really, it was gripping. It got emotional. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, what's he saying?" He goes, "That guy right there had an impact on me because I was watching how he put on his goggles, how he tied up his Speedo, and I said, I want to be a champion like him." And I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, it just touched my heart big time." And here this guy went on to be a world champion, Alejandro. If you look him up on Ultraman, he is just a stud and a half. So my point is, you never know the impact you're going to have on somebody by being at an event, by being your best, by keeping your head down, by just doing the very best. Be a good sport wherever you are. Don't be a jerk, and things will come back to you. So I just wanted to throw that in for our listeners.
So in the green room, Kurt and I were talking about the impact that, you know, coaching, teaching, being an example as a leader would have on the world. And Kurt made a comment about, 100 that impacting 100,000 people, 20,000 runners. And that story alone, Kurt, I have to imagine is already gotten you to the 100,000 people, because Alejandro has probably had impact on people as well. And so that domino effect, you're already there. You got to dream bigger, Kurt. You got to dream bigger.
Well, no, I know, I appreciate that, and just on that note, you just made me think about it. So here I did that first triathlon on Oahu in 1980, and then I go back to last October, and I'm doing my 50th Ironman distance, 11th time, and I'm thinking, I am so grateful. And I was actually able to race with 6 of my athletes. One of my athletes, John Renkin, pulled up to me at mile 16, was having a rough day, and I had a jellyfish encounter, which is a whole different story. And he's like he runs Boston like in 3:15. And so he comes up next to me and I said, "Hey, I want you to go ahead and finish." He goes, "Oh no, you and I are going to run all the way to the end." And I go, "What? We are going to run, shuffle, and tell stories the last time I was?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "You've done a lot for me and I want to do a lot for you." I go, "Whoa, that is super cool." So talk about being fulfilled. Oh my gosh. I mean, if my life ended tomorrow, I'm saying I got much more than I even imagined.
I guarantee you that. And I'm guessing that's the picture that's on your Instagram account where the two of you are running under the finisher's arch.
Very good. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, we capture that. And yeah, John and I met in Boulder about 2.5 years ago, and we kind of look alike, and he's a little bit younger, but it was very just epic. I mean, I think I'll take that to my grave.
You do look alike, because I will be honest, I was like, which one of these is Kurt? I can't tell. I had, so you spurred a thought in my mind as you were telling that story about 50 Ironman finishes. So do you have one race out of those 50 that you look back on, regardless of finishing time, but you thought to yourself, that was the race? That's the one that people dream of having. Do you have one of those?
I do.
Are you going to share
I could.
it? Please do.
I could out of all those. Yeah. There was probably the one. I mean, they're all special and they all have a story, and it's something that if I had to sort it out, I think it's in my mind. So I'll go back to 1982 because they had had the race in February with Julie Moss, and she really had a tough time at the finish. And Kathleen McCartney won. That the sport just blew up. Well, I come back in October and say, "Hey, I'm in on this," and a lot of preparation, and it was just super cool. So you can imagine the lineup. I'm in San Diego. I'd seen Mark Allen and actually rode with him a couple times, and I told him, Mark, he's first time I met him, he's like, "So do you think I'm good enough?" I said, Mark, I think you're really good, and I think you're going to do just fine. And I have a lot of respect for Dave Scott at the time, but inside I was like, and then we had our little team in San Diego, so it was called Phoenix Vitamins. So if you go back in time, it was like Phoenix Vitamins. So you got Bob Babbitt, you got Emilio DeSoto, you got myself, you got Mark Allen, this little team. And so I said, Mark, it's real easy, just stay with Dave as long as you can. I think that would be really, really, really good. So the race starts and the swim went well, and I'm out there on the bike, and I'm thinking, okay, I saw David go by, I wonder where Mark is. And then I'm on the run. So I came off the bike in that race like 20th, and I felt really good. And I'm moving up and moving up and moving up and moving up and moving up. And all of a sudden I see Dave, and he's already coming back. And I'm like, in my mind, where's Mark? I don't see Mark. And back then you just didn't know what was going on. So Dave had an outstanding race, but for me to come off 20th and move up to number 6, for me, that was the race. It was just one of those days where, you have them. It's just magical. You're in the state of flow. You're in the zone. It was like, that was hardly even difficult. There's other days where, God, I'm going uphill with a headwind all the time. So I think that was beyond my wildest dreams, because I didn't think I had that capability. Now, there was a gap between Dave and myself, but for me to be 6th overall at Kona, I think that just really exceeded expectations. And it was just Specials Day, and those runs down Alehi Drive. Every run down Alehi Drive is special, but that one in particular, I will never forget that I was just shocked, and other people were shocked, like, man, where'd you come from? So, and even back then, I remember I passed one person on the run, and he told me, he was a friend. He finished, I think, 10th. I was 6th. He goes, "You can't do that." And I said, "I'm not sure what you mean." He goes, "You can't pass me." And I said, "Well, why not?" He goes, "Because I ran 90 miles a week." And I said, "Oh, I didn't run but 60 miles a week." And why don't we talk after the race? Because I got some business to do right now. But it's just one of those days, and I think that that's something that develops your grit and your character and your inner confidence, because you're not going to do that all the time. But I think I am just so grateful. But again, I think every Ironman is special, but that one in particular, yeah, I will never forget.
That's a great story. And I think it's the stories like that connect us all to each other, because every person who's listening to this show, whether it's live or on a podcast, is going to think about their race, their utopia race that they had, regardless of finish time, regardless of position. But things just seem to click, and they will think about that. And so then the next time they go out for a training run, swim or bike, whatever it might be, will think about that. Like, that's the thing that's going to keep them moving. Which gets me to this question. So you're a pro from 80 to 85,
Mhm,
and you then go into schools teaching, and in 2016 you become a part of TriDot.
mhm.
And what's the connection between the pro athlete who stops racing professionally in 85 to the person who is working in a school system to the person who's now raising their hand to say, I want to be a part of the TriDot coaching family slash tree and helping others. Why is that a path that you took, and what drew you into the coaching side of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it was something that the beauty of being married to someone who is very logical and linear in her thinking. That's why I'm still married today after 46 years. That my short story, I was an inner city kid. And between my mom and dad, there were 9 marriages. I ran away when I was 14. I ran away when I was 17. I was the first person in my family to even graduate from high school, to get an associate degree, to get a bachelor's degree, and a master's degree. And my wife, I mean, she comes from educators. So I think it was something where we had planned out, hey, enjoy the time as a pro, but there's going to reach a point where it doesn't make sense and we're going to have a family. Well, that was 7 years into our marriage. So she just planned it all. Just, I mean, it was just like, this is how it's going to roll. Here's the lesson plan. Cool. So follow along. I got it. So I did the thing for 5 years. I jumped in education because I knew I couldn't do it. And I wanted a backup plan. I just needed that financial security. So we raised our kids. We were camping in the summer. We were both teachers. And, a quick sidebar, we ended up in Colorado many times. So I'm in Leadville, Colorado, of all places. And I walk by the store, Leadville 100. I'm like, oh dear, this could be something. I look up like, oh my gosh. And I went back to that night. I didn't say much, but I went back when I put my head down. I said, now that would be really freaking awesome if I could do that race. The next day I ran around Turquoise Lake 10 miles. I was like, oh my gosh, my wife's like, you do not look good. I said, I don't feel good the whole day. But little did I realize, I said, I'm going to go after this. So my first 100-mile run was the Hard Rock. I figured, what the heck, let's just jump right in. We're going to ride the big waves with the big boys. And that was in Silverton, and that has 33,000 vertical feet. My strategy was real simple. I was young, I was wild, and it was like, okay, just stay with the guy that won last year until he drops you. I stayed with him actually till mile 40, and then he had all kinds of problems. So I finished the Hard Rock. I was sixth overall. Boom. 6 weeks later, I go over to Leadville, and then the Tarahumara Indians are there. And my kids were just like, oh my gosh, these guys are really cool. And Trayson. And then that book, Born to Run, was written after that. So I spent time getting my reps in, developing fitness, trying to really learn my craft even more, being out there. And then I fast forward, it just seemed like that the coaching piece, because when I was in graduate school, I had a master's in exercise physiology. I was coaching swimming, track and field, cross country. Back then, I was preparing myself in the early 80s to be what I'm doing now. And then as I went through the educational system and went up to be a superintendent of schools and a CEO running charter schools, the leadership and the professional development. So I was fortunate to work with the Gallup organization, Franklin Covey, and I did a lot of professional development. So it seemed like I arrived when I came into TriDot is in 2016. I realized that as a superintendent of schools, it sounds very nice and you dress very nice, but I was starting to lose my passion for why I got into it. I made great money and it was super, but I reached out to a few friends of mine. They said, this is easy. You need to coach. Kind of scary, but I decided to do that. And before I knew it, it just started ramping up, and here I am today. I just cannot believe it. Every day I wake up, even during the night, and I've got messages, and people want to collaborate, and they want to connect, and it's really, really cool that I can work with them on their coaching and then coach athletes. So it's a win-win.
Yeah. So what's that like in coaching coaches and coaching athletes? What are the similarities? What are the differences?
Yeah, I think the similarities are that you want to serve in that capacity of being a guide, of being a mentor, of being a very good listener, and really tapping into your emotional intelligence. And I think as a coach, when I work with athletes, I really want to develop that trust. I want to get into their hearts, then I can get in their heads. And in doing that, I can really find out, what does success look like? Where do you want to go on this journey? And really come alongside them to really navigate them, get them to really open up so I can get into their heads. And that's good. And again, from a beginner to a mid-packer to a top age group, and then the ages from 40. Last year in Kona, I had two 80-year-old people. So that was pretty epic for me to say, wow, I'm actually coaching someone that's 80 years old and they want to listen to me. And that's pretty cool. And then again, when I shift over, I think the beauty of what we're doing now is that we're looking at coaching that it is not just a helper. And there's a lot of people that are coaches and I've gone through that. You can be like a helper, you can be a volunteer, you can be doing something as a side gig, but when you're a professional coach, you have to act professional, that you've got a great community around you, you're benchmarking, your athletes well, you've got a moral dilemma. You don't want to do anything that's considered malpractice. You want to always maintain your core values and your integrity. Put the spotlight on your athletes or your coaches, and also know that your role is always going to be needed because in this day and age, I think everyone deserves a great coach. So as I work with coaches now, the difference there is now I've got people literally all over the world. And what I do is I facilitate mastermind sessions. So if you go back to scripture, if you think of King Arthur and the Round Table, they were doing mastermind sessions. But it's really a vision that we had about a year and a half ago to start doing this. So think of a peer review where you're not a solopreneur, you are in a room virtually with 10 to 15 different coaches, and I facilitate the meeting, kind of like a Socratic seminar. I
Hmm.
kick it off and I do some things. I get them to talk. We go over really some major challenges they have and a very supportive environment. So you've got the support, but you've got the accountability. Because what I like is when coaches very nicely are pushing on other coaches, like, no, you got to start getting stuff done.
Hmm.
You've got to do this and look at your time, look at your marketing, look at your practice. But I think when you think of an ecosystem of trying to reach 100,000 athletes, and we've got 70 people in these mastermind groups, and we're trying to get to 100, and then we'll get to 150 and 200, it is just so fulfilling, so rewarding for me. I don't need to be the smartest person in the room, but I'm a good listener, believe it or not. And trying to tap into all these different groups and provide support. So for them, it's almost like a premium athlete when I have these coaches. So I've got kind of a split assignment. I've got my athletes, I've got my coaches, but I try to divide my day up that I'm doing both because I can learn from my athletes and I can learn from my coaches.
There are numerous challenges, but one of the first ones that comes to mind for a coach today is dealing with the inundation of for the athlete of information, right, wrong, or indifferent information, right? You can open up any social media app and somebody's telling you if you drink, hot water with 7 squeezes of lemon juice, you're going to run a 4 minute mile. And um, I guess misinformation would be the right word. That challenge exists. What other challenges are your coaches facing in today's world where there's information literally at our fingertips?
Yeah, I think probably the one thing that we encounter is that trying to get people to really understand if we look at AI and we look at algorithms and really trying to get underneath the hood at TriDot to say, okay, we've got 20 years of data. We've got information in there that every hour you're using the platform, there's 1,000 different checkpoints. When I can look at graphs and charts of what the athlete has done, for the coach, it takes the guesswork out of, I don't have to formulate a plan. The plan is right there. Now I can make certain tweaks and really the beauty of it is that it does about 80% of the heavy lifting, but I know my athletes. So if they call me up like I am still super fatigued from that brick session on Saturday, I can adjust the level in that workout. Or I got a hamstring that is really bothering, I can adjust the volume, the intensity. Or for a female, hey, it's that time of the month where things aren't where I can go ahead and make those adjustments. So it's being able to have the athlete understand the AI and also leverage your EQ as a coach. And the question I've posed to coaches and even athletes is how much better are you with this platform and also with a coach that really has knows you've developed that trust, and they say you're probably 30% better. So I think for coaches, it's knowing how to go back and forth with people and also trusting the process, because if we look at what we did back in the 80s, and I know the pros kind of set the example, but we know now for sure there is no need for any person doing a full Ironman to train 25 hours a week and almost be in divorce court all the time, that we can show people the stress on their bodies that's very objective. There's no guesswork. It's not subjective, it's very objective. You will see what I see when you look at this graph, to really check for understanding, to let the athlete know 13 to 15 hours, if you're doing the training correctly, we know it now,
Yeah.
that it's a lot better. And honestly, when we go back to the 80s, some people like, Dave Scott's had some challenges with this art. I know Scott Tinley has had some challenges. And I think honestly, it's that reality of we were doing way too much volume. And then I think you throw in the nutrition on top of that. When you look at, there's a lot of education there, is really trying to figure out what works, because as athletes are saying, hey, I've got to max out at 90 grams, of carbos, or 120. A coach told me the other day he pushes his athletes to 150. I'm thinking, oh my goodness. And if it's maltodextrin or if it's sugar, what's your lifespan that you're going to be able to hold on to that? And then you look at your metabolic health, you look at the inflammation. So it sounds real easy. I can be a triathlete coach, but I tell people, in all due respect, it's kind of like cooking a Thanksgiving meal. You're juggling so many different things,
Yeah.
and people can actually, follow our plan on Try It Out. That's the beauty of that, and they can follow that, and they get that, and they understand. And then again, we've got a community with our community that we have in a platform, that it's really kind of a community connect. And then we've got a Facebook page. We have podcasts, so we're constantly trying to educate people. And I think coaches, they're facing that. So to answer your question, there's too much information, because someone will say, "Well, I read that on Facebook." Outstanding. That's awesome. And you know what? I am your guide. I'm all in on this. I'm like 110% in. So I could be wrong, but tell me what you heard and what you're thinking,
Mhm.
and then do that. And then sometimes I'll send them a podcast, and they'll come back and I'll say, "What was your takeaway? What was your favorite frame?" This is what they'll say. They said exactly what you said. Did they really? Yeah, they did. They made it sound just like you told me 5 times. So it's kinda like when someone else tells them that, it really
100%.
it really kind of validates that. And I think also just trying to make sure the athlete is focused on their individual journey, because everyone has their own journey. And I think I deal with some people that are super competitive, but I try to tell them this: you're going to race today the way you can race today. I know it's great to talk about 10 years ago, and it's great to
Mhm.
talk about 15 years ago, but today when you are racing, I want you to race at this point in time,
Yeah.
versus you're going to get super frustrated. And enjoy your journey, and develop that grit and tenacity, and let's finish strong.
Yeah, you have to stay present in today's world when you're out there training and racing, and you start thinking about past or the things you wish are coming up, right? You lose that connection to where you are in the moment. So I would also think the other challenge you might face as a coach, because we see it all the time, is getting the athletes to recover well, rest. You're not losing fitness if you go to sleep. As a matter of fact, it's the exact opposite. You're getting stronger because you actually did sleep. And to your point, you weren't putting in 20 to 25 hours of training, where then your recovery becomes garbage, for lack of a better phrase. So I would imagine that's a challenge, that your athletes and the coaches that you're working with, their athletes, present to them.
Yeah, and no, you're spot on. And I think I always tell my athletes that stress plus rest equals growth. And
Hmm.
you've got to be able to balance out. And I know you don't want to do a zone 2 workout, but I will assure you, when you look at it from a physiological standpoint, it is the yin and the yang. If you're constantly going into a zone 3 and zone 4, that's not going to be good for you, say long term. And I know, even Jason, when I was doing trail running, I would run trails only 3 days a week. But if I was in Colorado, the other 3 days a week, all I would do was hike.
Yeah.
I would hike for 5 or 6 hours. I'm just up and down those mountains, up and down, and that provided a real good balance. So yeah, and I think we're getting better at that, and each athlete's a little bit different. But I think I really try to push my athletes. Let's go over recovery. Let's talk about your diet. Let's talk about your rest. Let's talk about your mobility work. Let's talk about yoga. Let's talk about massage. Let's talk about all the things you do, and try to do it in such a way as to prevent, as compared to, oh, the place is burning down, and then we're dealing with, kind of symptoms, and then we're looking at those things, versus let's kind of go to the cause of what is maybe causing this issue, especially later in the season. I know in Kona in particular, if we
Yeah.
did a questionnaire, I know for sure that 70% of the people either say two things: I'm injured, or I cannot wait for this race to get over because I am totally smoked. I
Yep.
am burnt out. So yeah, we just got to keep the balance.
You probably get the same response to Ironman Arizona, which takes place even later in the year in that November. I remember I raced Ironman Arizona in 2012, and everybody around me had finished their race. They either raced Ironman Texas in May, or they raced Ironman Florida a month or so earlier. And now here I am, still out, going to get 5-6 hour bike rides, swimming for an hour to 2 hours, and almost by myself, right? And now you're lonely because of that. And so being smart about training and picking the race that is right for you
Hmm.
is also super important, and not just going with the flow of what everybody else is doing. It may not fit your schedule well, it may not be X, Y, and Z, but figure out the race that works best for you so that the training can be enjoyable. It's going to be hard, but you're going to enjoy it. You'll rest well, you'll recover well, and then you can perform on race day the way you expect to.
Yeah, and you sound like a very good coach just by the way you're saying that. And I think that the one statement that I've seen from athletes or heard is they'll say this, "Coach, you'll never believe what I did." Now, as a coach, when you hear that, you already know what they did. Yeah, I signed up for this race, or we went out with our buddies, and one thing led to the next, and yeah, I'm totally in on this one. Oh, okay. So really, it's trying to map out a multi-year plan.
Yeah.
Let's play the longevity game. And again, we talked about people that are getting older, I think, and I'm very, very fortunate that I can do that. As you can build in travel, you can build in races, but when you do a multi-year, it's like, oh, let's try this race here and this race there, and really enjoy it versus, hey, it's just a one and done. I'm
Hmm.
going to put all my poker chips in on this one and hope and pray that I can get to the finish. So I think it's something that we need to continue to look at for athletes because it's a huge investment. And
Yeah.
my worst uh, kind of thought with people is that if they're not strong swimmers and they DNF, for example, in Arizona, and I was there 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and I feel real good in the water and I came out early, but I didn't realize that 150 people had to get pulled out of that water. So you can imagine
Yeah.
what that feels like when you spent all that time and money in the hotel and the travel, and your race only lasted 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes. It's just really a bummer. So that's another thing that we're doing is with our pool schools, trying to get people that tried out and outside of tried out into our pool schools to see some massive gains in their swimming, their confidence or competence. So that's something else we're doing because we don't have enough to do.
I will tell you a quick story about the athlete getting pulled out of the water early in the race. I was that athlete in 2019 at Ironman Wisconsin. So that year, I had raced Rocky Raccoon 100 in February. I
Mhm.
raced Western States 100 at the end of June, early July. And I was the athlete that said, I cannot wait for this event to be over because I'm just so tired of training and training and training. We get in the water. I swim 6/10 of a mile, Kurt. I'm not kidding you because I looked at my watch and it was literally 30 minutes on the dot. And I did the math and I said, there's no way I'm going to swim for 2 hours and then get on the bike for 112 miles and then run for 26 miles. And I am fortunate because when I raised my hand and the jet ski took me to the dock, I got out and I was able to have perspective that this was my ninth Ironman. I have 8 finishes already. Like, it's okay, right? But to your point, there were a lot of athletes sitting next to me with tears in their eyes who had been training for months, if not years, and this was their first event. And they got pulled out within 20, 30, 40 minutes of the start of the race. And so your point about longevity in the sport and planning things out and looking down the road as opposed to the immediate foreground is really important. I would ask athletes to look at what is it that you want to get out of these sports? What is it that you hope to achieve, not today, but multiple tomorrows from today? Because I think if you can have like longevity, then when you go through these obstacles and these hurdles and you get defeated at moments, it gives you perspective to say, I can come back stronger. I don't have like everything isn't just resting on this one event.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think when you share that story again, as we've looked at kind of regional conferences that we've had with USA Triathlon, when they actually showed AI on the screen for curiosity, TriDot came out number one at 55% of people like, I'm really curious about this app. Number two was Chat GPT. So you can imagine people are literally putting prompts in like, give me a training plan for a 70.3 race. To me, that's really, really scary that boy, you're playing with hand grenades. Again, you can get a general plan, but I think the thing that separates TriDot is that we've got all these metrics in there. The big thing is our environmental norms. So if you're in Southern California, we've got someone in Colorado, someone in Florida, someone in Canada, someone in Brazil. Every workout, when you really are showing that to the athlete on their app on the phone, they can dial in because we know their paces, we know their heart rates. And to me, it takes all the guess. It's just like when you're going to travel somewhere, it's like, hey, I know where I should go and I should follow that. So I think that's important. And I think people are going to stay in the sport a lot longer when they have success and enjoy it. And I think the biggest benefit as a coach or a colleague or a confidant, it comes down to one thing. You have a sounding board. And I think it's easy to say, hey, I can do that. I'll jump into a 70.3. If you have a sounding board, they will keep you from going off the rails. Be safe, enjoy it, and come back to race again. And again, like you said, just enjoy that longevity.
We're running out of time, Kurt, and I want to get to our rapid fire food questions. But before we do that, where can people find you? Where can they get more information about TriDot if they're Tri Inquisitive, they're coach, I want to be a coached athlete inquisitive. Where can they find you and TriDot?
Yeah, I mean, TriDot is real easy. You can Google it. It's just go to TriDot and it's right there. You'll have the homepage. If people want to reach me, you just go to Kurt, KURT.Madden at tridot.com. So in this day and age, it's really easy to find people, but we love to help. We have a very strong community and we want to make sure that people can tap into all the resources that we can provide them.
And we'll put that in the show notes when it comes out on our podcast platform. Remember to search for the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network on your favorite podcast platform. Okay, Kurt, I love chatting with you and getting the history lessons of the sport of triathlon. But one of the things I love more than stories is food. So are you ready for our rapid fire food questions?
Is this going to be a fast food? Like, I think I can do it.
Take your time, and if you've got stories about the foods I ask you, share them too. Okay. Oreos. Are you an old school Oreo guy, a double stuff Oreo guy, the thin crisps that they have these days, or the cakesters?
Boy, I don't even know what you're talking about. Were you speaking Latin? I'll be honest with you. I can't remember when I ever even had an Oreo, but they all sound pretty good and pretty enticing. I'll say that.
We'll move on to the next one then.
Okay.
Licorice, red or black?
With that one there, I'm probably gonna go with red.
Do you have a preferred maker of them? Is it Red Vines or Twizzlers or whatever package is handed to me?
Brother, you're taking me into rabbit holes I've never even been in, so I'm kind of faking it till I make it. I don't know. The first one you said sounded really good. I guess you get those at Costco or something. I see them.
Yeah, Costco, CVS. This is the hard hitting journalism we have here at Run Dry Bike.
Okay.
Do you know what Peeps are?
Do I know what Peeps are?
Yeah.
I do not know what Peeps are. I know
Right.
sometimes you say Peeps like people, but if it's a food substance called Peeps, I have no clue what
It's
you're
a
talking
food
about.
substance. That's the greatest description I've ever heard of this particular product because it's exactly what it would be like. It's a marshmallow covered in sugar, like candied sugar, like the crunchy kind, and it's made to look like a bird. And they typically sell them during Easter. And I will say this, like I am not a fan of them whatsoever. Like they might be the worst thing on the planet from a candy perspective. And yet we have had guests who love them and tell us that they're even better when you allow them to get hard. So let them basically sit on the counter and become rocks. And I'm like, tell me how something bad making it worse makes it taste better. Like that doesn't work for me. What about candy corn? Do you know what candy corn is? Can we ask you that question?
Oh yeah, I know what candy corn is. Yeah.
Are you a fan or is it one of those things where you're like, dude, just because I know what it is doesn't mean I eat it?
I think maybe I'll go back to like Halloween, Little League
Yes.
baseball. Yeah, no, I haven't done candy in years, centuries. Yeah,
This
that's
has got to be
that's
one that
decades.
you eat. This has got to
Okay,
be one that you eat.
all right.
Crunchy or creamy peanut butter?
Now we're talking. Now I can get lined up. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's definitely my go-to. I can do either one. Yeah, it kind of just depends on the moments.
Yeah, well, we have to have answers here. So creamy or
Oh,
crunchy?
I can't waffle. Okay,
No, no waffling.
I'm gonna go with the crunch.
Do you still eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches?
I do. I will share with our listeners. I think I probably have out of 7 days, 4 out of the 7 days, I'm doing that. It's just real easy because I'm in between workouts. I can't do a lot of high protein in between. That's my go-to, and I can swim and bike and run, and I can hold it down.
My guy, because I'm about 4 out of 7 days a week too when it comes to PB&J. So here's the question.
All right.
When you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, do you put the crunchy peanut butter on one slice of bread and the jelly on the other slice of bread and smash them together? Or do you put the crunchy peanut butter on one slice of bread, jelly over the top, and then fold it over, put the other slice of bread over the top?
No, I keep them separate. But in the meantime, I've got a nice little puppy dog that is just drooling, looking up at me. So it's a party. She's my assistant. She's like right there. Bring it, bring it. She's like, yeah, come on, I'll take it anyway. So yeah, I do those separately.
And because our questions about food aren't absurd enough, how do you eat your peanut butter and jelly sandwich? And I'll give you some options. Are you the kind of person who just attacks it? Are you the kind of person that cuts it into 2 rectangles or 2 triangles? Do you cut it into 4 squares or 4 triangles?
Boy, you give me a lot of choices. I just shift to beast mode. I just one bite at a time, like 3 or 4 bites, and it's just totally gone. They're like, boy, you're fast. Yeah, I was hungry. I needed that.
3 or 4 bites. So Rich Soares, our good friend, told me
Uh-huh.
how he eats his peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and he's an attacker too.
Yeah.
And the question I asked him was, so do you go into the middle or do you start on the edge and then go across like it's a corn on the cob as you're eating it? Because, we have hard hitting questions here.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
just go to the corner. If 4
Yeah.
bites, you go corner, 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 corner,
Yeah.
right?
Boom. It's all gone. No, I can be a machine. I mean, on that same note, back in the day, like I said, when we were camping, this will take 20 seconds, so I'll keep it brief, but true story. When we were camping with our sons, we pulled into a KOA campground in Ouray, which is near Silverton. They had a
Yep.
sign up there for $5. It's all the pancakes you could eat. I ate 24 pancakes. When we showed up a year later, when I came back, the guy said, "You're not welcome here."
I love it. We have audience is joining in. Marin says, "What do you not know about Oreos?" And then she just gave the peeps with the little throw up emoji guy. And then she says, when it comes to peanut butter and jelly, she just attacks the sandwich as well. This is what's awesome about this end of the show questions that we have. Do you eat ice cream?
I do.
What's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Uh, I'm really easy. I can go with almost anything. It just depends where I am in the moment. From if I'm in France, if I'm New Zealand, if I'm here, I would say at home, Trader Joe's vanilla with a few berries on top.
Classic.
Brother, it just puts me out. I'm just like, boom, I'm in bed. I'm feeling good.
Do you enjoy pie? Is pie something that's on the menu for you?
Occasionally. The problem is the pie doesn't last too long once it's here.
What kind of pie? What's your favorite pie?
Oh, I would go with apple. Again, we have, I think it's called Julian Pie Shop here in San Diego. They're kind of almost like world famous. So yeah, apple pie is good, but I'll do pumpkin too.
I'm a huge fan of the tart. So give me lemon meringue or key lime pie. Like that to me is heaven on a plate when it's that tangy, citrusy note. Make your lips smack, pucker up a little bit.
Oh, Jason, I'll make you some tiramisu. There's only like 1,200 calories in a slice.
That's
like,
it.
Yeah.
I can do an Ironman at that point. I'm ready to go. Before I let you go, last one. A tray of brownies is sitting on the counter. It's been allowed to cool off for a little bit. Are you going to the corner? Are you going to just the edge? Or are you going into the middle for the ooey gooey part?
Yeah, I don't do brownies all that often. I'd probably, I don't know. Boy, you're making this tough. I'm probably going to start in the corner. Yeah, and just kind of go from there.
I love it.
Yeah.
You're gonna get off this podcast. You're gonna be like, that is the strangest set of questions I've ever been asked.
No, I think that's really good. I'll tell my wife, and then she'll make all that stuff. And I'm like, oh, wait, there's only 2 of us in the house, so that's for you.
You're in San Diego. You're not that far away. I could jump in my
Yeah.
car and help out.
Okay. Sounds great.
Kurt, thank you so much for joining us. We'll drop your contact info into the show notes. And for all the guests out there that showed up for us, we really appreciate you taking the time. It is the greatest gift you can give to somebody else. And we appreciate you sharing it with us. Have a great night.
Thank you so much.